And Combs exclusive, speaking for the first time about this, the attorney retained by John McCain in this case, defense attorney Robert Bennett, also the author of the new autobiography, In the Ring, The Trials of a Washington Lawyer. Robert Bennett, your brother, is often with us. We're happy to have you on the show, Mr. Bennett. Thanks for being with us. What can you tell us about this? The Washington Post reported in December that you got involved in this particular case. What can you explain?
Well, Senator McCain did not want a repeat of what occurred years ago in South Carolina, namely a real smear campaign, and asked me to assist him, and I have been assisting him. And I think what the New York Times did here was shameless, just shameless. As you pointed out in the lead, it's almost entirely unsourced. You know, I'm in a pretty unique position to talk about John McCain. First, I should tell your listeners, you know, I'm a registered Democrat, so I'm not on his side of a lot of issues. But I investigated John McCain for a year and a half at least when I was special counsel to the Senate Ethics Committee in the Keating Five, which, by the way, this New York Times article goes back to and discusses, goes back years and years. Yeah. And if there is one thing I am absolutely confident of, is John McCain is an honest man. I recommended to the Senate Ethics Committee that he be cut out of the case, that there was no evidence against him, and I think for the New York Times to dig this up just shows that Senator McCain's public statement about this is correct. It's a smear job. I'm sorry.
But it's okay, sir. In your book, you actually talk about the Keating case and how you suggested they not pursue John McCain. Yeah. The Washington Post reported back in December that you sent prepared answers to written questions submitted by the New York Times concerning the breaking news we're discussing tonight. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, all of the matters that they allude to, I mean, they're not even very specific. We answered fully to the New York Times. We showed them that there was just nothing there. And unfortunately, they have just obviously disregarded all of the hard evidence that we presented. Now, I'm not suggesting that the New York Times has an agenda here. I'll let others conclude that. But they certainly have allowed themselves to be a vehicle for a repeat of what happened in South Carolina. Yeah. And I suspect it's only because John McCain is winning so much that we are even reading this story.
Hey, Bob, it's Sean Hannity. Always good to see you. Although, as you know, I often agree more with Bill than yourself. But thank you for being with us today. It's funny because, as Alan pointed out, you say in your book specifically, I'm often asked which case in my career was the most professionally challenging and difficult. You mentioned that it is the Keating Five. Bob, I have read this New York Times piece now 3 times, and what I see here is nothing but innuendo, rumor. They want the reader to draw conclusions. And as we come on the air here, the McCain campaign has, in fact, responded. And let me tell our audience what they said, that the New York Times has lowered their standards to engage in a hit-and-run smear job. Do you agree with that, having read this piece?
I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, ironically, you guys were kind enough to invite me on to talk about my book. This story broke, you know, an hour ago. And this was not my intention here, you know, to come on and defend John McCain, but I think it's the right thing to do. One thing I concluded, he is an honest man, and this is a real hit job.
Well, Bob, it is fascinating because my preparation tonight was for your book, and you said that you talked about this, that you recommended no further action be taken against Senators McCain and Glenn, principally because, you know, they learned that, you know, there was a criminal referral. They stopped aggressively doing Keating's bidding, and you said this was pure politics as the Democrats on the committee did not want to cut McCain loose. As I read this piece, I want to know if you come to the same conclusion. Because it was so full of innuendo and so lacking of fact and so involved in smear, I came to the conclusion that the goal here was to bring up a 20-year-old scandal that you do write about in your book.
Well, you know, maybe I was prophetic. I mean, I wrote that chapter a long time ago. If your listeners want to know about the Keating Five case, I have a whole chapter on it. And what happened was that I had recommended that John McCain be cut out of it and not go forward. And, you know, I call it the way I see it. As I said, I'm a Democrat. And I recommended they go forward against Senators DeConcini, Senator Cranston, and Senator Regal. But if you cut out John McCain, you would have had 28 days of public hearings with just Democrats in the dock. And it's probably the first time in the history of the Senate that they rejected the advice of their counsel to exonerate a senator.